Hi, everyone. As Nanette said, my name is Lisa Dent. I'm the Associate Curator for Contemporary Art here. And about a year ago, when GCAC came and started talking to us about the project, I thought that I had just begun to meet some artists in Columbus, and it was another great opportunity for me to go to some studios and see their work, and it was fantastic. I acted as a juror this year for the awards, and I was really struck by some of the work that was included and was really happy with the choices that were made in the end for the awards. So without any further ado, let me introduce everyone. All the way on my right is Michael B. Hayes, who did the metalwork. This is Lynda McClanahan sitting next to him. Danielle Julian Norton, MJ Bole, Jill Galenstein, and Steve Thurston. Okay, so there's a combination here. There were 4 Visual Arts Fellowship Awards this year, as Nanette mentioned, which was Lynda, MJ, Jill, and Steven. And after those awards were given, 2 artists were selected to have residencies at our sister city in Dresden, and that is Michael and Danielle. So I wanted to talk a little bit about working in Columbus and hopefully ask them about their work so they just give us a little bit more insight. And luckily we were able to keep the PowerPoint going, so we have some images that we're scrolling through here. So I kind of want to ask you all, just so we get a sense of who has been in Columbus for a while, when you got here. Michael, could you start? Just talk about when you came to the Columbus? Yeah, we have microphones, sorry.
Sorry.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think so.
I came here in 1980 and started working in silver 10 years ago.
And you came for school or family?
Yeah,
You did?
yeah.
And Lynda?
Well, I came in 1975 and have been here ever since. Things have really changed in Columbus. I feel like I've grown up along with the town.
Yeah.
I am a professional musician mainly, or have been. About 4 years ago, I started doing art in a very serious way, and here I am today. So.
Yeah. Danielle?
Yeah, I've grown up in Columbus, so it's been my hometown. So.
Yeah. And MJ? Thank you.
I'm from Cleveland, and I came in 1989 to teach at Ohio State in the art department.
Which is where you still are, right?
I'm still there,
Yeah.
yes.
Jill?
Hi, I actually grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I was born and raised here. I went to CCAD, and although I've moved several places over the years in the past, Columbus is always a place that I end up coming back to. So.
Yeah.
I came here in 1994. We came from the East Coast, living on a small town in Maine, so it was a big jump to the big city for us. And I came as a visiting artist to Ohio State, was there for 2 years under that, and then on faculty ever since.
So we'll start with you on my next question then. I wanted to talk to each of you about, partly about, working as an artist in Columbus, but more specifically about GCAC and when you heard about the fellowship, and have you applied before? What's been your experience with the fellowship?
I've been very blessed with the support of GCAC. In '96, I think I received my first one. I've received 3, and received the opportunity to go to Dresden as well, which the work that's flashing up there is some of the collaborations that extended from that. So it's been a wonderful program to participate in.
Yeah. Jill, have you applied before?
Yeah, actually, I had applied before. The first year I applied, I was chosen as an alternate, so I was able to apply for the Dresden Residency and got that the first year. I can't remember, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now. So I spent 3 months in Dresden, which was an amazing experience. I made a brand new body of work there. And then last year I applied again, was eligible to apply again, and was lucky enough to get the grant money this time around.
That's great. MJ?
Thank you, GCAC. Yeah, I've gotten the grant twice, and I went to Dresden in 2004.
Yeah, so this was my second time applying, and I don't have a history of awards, but so I'm going to Dresden in a few weeks, and I'm really thankful for both GCAC and OAC. Actually, they've been very supportive in my career.
GCAC has been pretty much my only source of atta-girls. I've won several awards at the Ohio State Fair through GCAC. I won the fellowship this year. It's the first time I ever applied, so thank you.
I'm a first-time applicant too, and but I do have a family history of it. My wife did the Dresden trip about 10 years ago.
Okay. Well, since you were ending with you, that's great, because I wanted to ask you, you're leaving for Dresden fairly soon, and I'm curious what you are hoping to do there.
Well, I've got a box that's maybe about 70 pounds worth of metal and tools that I'm dragging with me. So I'm hoping to get through with customs, that they won't panic when they see all the strange objects and chemicals and things, and that they'll let me go through, and I won't be stuck doing tinfoil art or something when I get there. So.
Yeah. And so no sightseeing, it's you and...
Oh yes, plenty of sightseeing, and I'd like to get up to Berlin for a quick hit, of course, to the museums. And when my wife comes later, we're going to spend a week. We're going to go over to Budapest.
Oh, fantastic. That's great. Danielle, what about you? Danielle, for the exhibition, you might have noticed on the labels, is part of a collaborative called Suite 42. And are you both going to be there at some part of the time so that you can still work together? Yeah, what are you going to...
Yeah, so Tara Krajnek is in the collaborative with myself, and we're planning to go to Dresden and Berlin together to kind of see galleries, museums, and kind of network and meet artists and make work about being there, I think. And
Yeah. So it will be a response to being there and together. That's great. I wanted to ask Lynda a little bit about the paintings. So for all of you, they're the very colorful paintings that are sort of in the east corner of the gallery. And I know, in your personal statement that you had submitted, there were lots of questions about where the impetus was for some of those the figures. And could you just talk a little bit about them?
Are you talking about that red-skinned woman?
Yes, there she is, actually. Yeah.
I don't know how much to go into it, but the short answer is the red-skinned woman is the spirit of life, Mother Nature. In Hinduism, she'd be called the Shakti. And in yoga, she would refer to a certain system of nerves in the body. But basically, she's life, kind of like who we are before we even have a name, just sort of life. She sort of, to me, personifies, or she's an expression of what it means to be alive, really. I mean, we think we know what it's like to be alive, and we think we're very comfortable being in the world, but perhaps it's a little bit alien. Perhaps it's not so comfortable. Maybe it's like powerful, maybe it's naked, maybe it's weird, maybe it's a red lady.
But you also connect the work to Ohio in significant ways. Can you talk a little bit about those images?
Yes, that's very, very important to me, that my work be firmly rooted in the place where we live, in the place where I live. This is where I live my life. This is where many of you are going to live your lives. Many people on this stage were born here. I wasn't born here, but I probably will die here. This is the theater of my life. I've done some traveling in India, and in India, oftentimes there will be a deity that's sort of tied specifically to that particular town or village. So there would be, maybe in our terms, like the Jesus of Columbus. There'd be a certain kind of god or goddess that is a pan-Indian deity, but also is tied to that specific place. And that I really took that to heart when I came home, because Columbus is a holy place. It's not any less holy than any place that I went to in India. And that's what I'm trying to express when I add little buckeyes or I add little local references. It's not to make it like a postcard or something. It's to communicate the idea that the place where we live is holy. This is the real deal, you know.
I think they're the nicest Buckeye necklaces that I've seen, actually. If you look really closely, they're all...
Oh, why, thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, very nice. Let me switch gears here a little bit. Since MJ has the microphone, I wanted to ask you about your research. MJ has the several objects around indoor plumbing. Let's put it that way. And I'd love to hear tell everyone, you know, how that started and where it's led you.
Yeah, I guess for really maybe 40 years, I've collected imagery surrounding segues, adjacents about toilets and related history and odd names like the ejecto and the expulso and just the crazy history that goes with it. And some of the pieces in the exhibition are some excerpts from my piece that I did at Eastern State Penitentiary Historic Site in Philly. My piece there was called Purge Incomplete, and it was about the history of plumbing there. The penitentiary opened in the 1830s, and the prisoners had toilets while President Jackson was using a chamber pot. And the drawings were proposal drawings for that piece. They had no idea what I would do, but from that I developed the piece. And then some of the pieces, I've been working for 2 years to put that history and other histories together in a book I'm making at Logan Elm Press here in Columbus, called Purge Incomplete, or rather, I'm so sorry, called Toilet Worship. And so I'm putting that all together here. I'm 2/3 of the way done. The tin types that are here as kind of a mundane Muybridge grid each one will come with one of the first 40 books in the edition of 150, and the entire collection, as they are here, will be the inset pages. And then lastly, in Dresden, my project, I guess I'm very interested in the underbelly, and for me, I was really trying to see, I wasn't going to Berlin, I really wanted to see, since fate took me to Dresden, I really wanted to see what that daily day was, and out of that came that little original watercolor book, and then subsequently in 2005 at Knus Press in Holland, I made MJ's Daily Spy History.
And that was from Dresden.
That was my project. That was really what I thought. Well, I could make many little tiny paintings in the time that I was there.
I have to ask though, what is the most fascinating aspect to you about the way that the toilets were set up in the prisons? I've noticed some of the safety things, but are those the things that fascinate you? You know, those sort of to keep away suicides and all of that kind of stuff?
And Acorn, I mean, the history is, you know, it's sad, it's scatological, it's poignant, but yeah, and I also noticed that Ohio State, good old Ohio State, also uses Acorn Industries, the same company that makes some of those suicide-resistant combis, toilets that you can't drown yourself, drown yourself in the toilet. They're very narrow. They're one of the doors in the piece had a stripe cut out of a toilet. Some of the research for the piece I did at Kohler in a residency in the Iron Foundry.
I can imagine Kohler was really fascinated to work with you, actually. It's been a great...
Yeah, that's a fantastic residency.
Yeah. Jill, I have already had several people ask me this, and I'm sure many people already ask you about how long it takes you for these incredibly intricate drawings, which it's almost like this PowerPoint is stopping right when I need it to.
That's nice, yeah. Well, I guess I can speak to this piece specifically and say that it probably took It's hard to say. Maybe about 6 weeks of steady work, 5, 6 hours a day on it. But I think this piece is I made congruently with one other piece. I was working back and forth, which is a rarity. I usually focus on one piece at a time and tend not to bounce back and forth for a lot of different reasons, but mainly because the pieces are about time and space, and to really get that idea across in one piece, it's best for me to just focus on it as opposed to bouncing around, because while I'm the process of working, often what I'm going for will change, and if I'm going from one piece to another, then it's not as clear. So.
And it's partly the ink work, but if you look closely, what I love are the sort of splashes of, was it airbrush paint or something
Right.
that sort of gives it the depth. But do you ever, are they always on paper, or do you work on canvas or other materials?
No, they're always on paper. I've started a new series on color aids so that the background is very dark and the foreground is light. But they're always on some form of paper, and the majority of it is done with pitograph pens, which are drafting pens, which are really kind of a pain to use if you've ever used them. But the good news with them is that you can mix your own color, so you're not, held hostage to whatever a company has decided to put in the pen.
Yeah, I think she's understating that. If any of you have ever tried to draw with a rapidograph, you hold it too long in one place and it just sort of bleeds and drips. And so when I saw these, I was very impressed with that. But I also wanted to find out a little bit more what you were thinking about as you created these forms, and I wonder if you could talk to people about that.
Sure. Well, I guess it starts out with rather grandiose themes of time and space and particles and string theory, and I like to think a lot about black holes and star nebulas and those kind of things. And while I was kind of thinking about what I was going to say about the work today, it kind of occurred to me, not for the first time, but again, that I find thinking about black holes to be very comforting, which I guess is probably the opposite of what most people would think when they think of these like giant things that eat everything in their paths. It makes me feel, what comforts me about it is that it makes me feel that any mistake that I make doesn't really matter in the scheme of things. And that's always nice to think about when you're trying to do these really intricate pen and ink drawings where there's no erasing the ink. There's no turning back time once you've used the pigment on the page. And so it is a really kind of freeing process. So.
Melissa Stark, our reporter, came to look at the show and is going to be writing about it in Alive, and she saw your name and said, isn't Jill a photographer? Didn't she? So you started out doing mostly photography, or is that?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Is that what you applied with to the GCAC fellowship, or no?
No, with the
Okay.
GCAC fellowship, I've always done pen and ink drawings, but when I was at CCAD and even through grad school, I was working predominantly with photography and video. And I did, in fact, receive a grant through the OAC with photography. But it's not that I grew tired of it. The problem was that I lost access to a lot of the equipment that I needed to make those works, and I still needed to create.
Yeah.
And so I sat down and started drawing again. And so for the past probably 6 years, I've been focusing on this work.
drawings.
But now I'm working on a project again where I'm doing a stop motion animation of the drawing and process. So it's kind of now come full circle, and I'm starting to
that's great.
integrate them all again.
Oh, that's great. Steven, if any of you have noticed the porcelain work that was in there and the elaborate titles, I kind of wanted to ask Steven about them. He mentioned that they came out of the Dresden Residency. So can you talk about that time there? And
Yeah, it's been a kind of a ongoing relationship. My wife received a Dresden Residency in '99, and so I had the opportunity to go over and visit. Shortly after the wall had come down and Eastern Germany is just kind of opening up, and the first thing that struck me when I went there was in the center of the Oldstadt is the Procession of the Princes, which is this large porcelain mural that depicts all the leaders Saxony up until, I think, 1920 or something like that. And what was amazing about it was that this was one of the few things that actually survived the bombings of the Allied forces. Whoops. I can't figure these things out. So for the kind of impact that that had, really opened my eyes to the power of porcelain. And of course, for ceramic artists, European porcelain, Meissen is the epicenter, and that's Dresden. And to have that opportunity to kind of go where the European porcelain evolved was pretty impressive. And to then see how it endured the bombing was kind of an eye-opener. And so through my wife, she was able to initially have some collaborations with the Dresden Porcelain Factory, which is in Freital. And Freital was spared the bombing, so they still had all their historic building was intact, all their molds were intact. And so she was very fortunate to have a kind of an opening up on that. And we then maintained some collaborations through contacts and whatnot. So when I had the opportunity to go over, we went back again and started to have more access to their archives of molds. And then I went back the following year with a few of our grad students and had yet another access to all their molds. So the ironic element was that while we were there, there's this great kind of acknowledgement that porcelain is important within Dresden, but it's also not so much embraced anymore, that it's not revered as the material that it once was. And so to think about Dresden and all its kind of reconfigurations, that what you're actually walking through is built in 1950 versus the 1700s, that there's all this kind of artifice that's involved, that to be able to play with their forms and kind of question authenticity, that was where, long story short, where it all kind of goes.
Yeah. And so the titles then are specifically to forms of?
Yes, they're
Yeah.
specifically to the forms that they had. Again, we had some limited access, but access to some of their very prominent forms. So the mops it's a derivative of Meissen. You see a lot of those forms become offshoots. And the Saxon Porcelain Company was kind of a competitor of Meissen. They came a few hundred years afterwards. So they would be still producing some of what would be somewhat like espionage knockoffs. They would make forms that were very similar. And so for me to then be able to play with them kind of was extending that question of what was authentic, what was...
And so the hybrids are you, or there were okay, yeah. I wanted to ask Michael, when we met at your studio, you talked about the fact that you don't do studio visits a lot. You don't have, a curator that people come to the studio. What are the other ways that there are people seeing your work and that you, sort of elaborate? Are you feeling like you're sort of not necessarily in the art context, the gallery thing, or as opposed to being in arts festival or metalwork fairs? How do you show your work?
I've been in the Ohio State Fair for quite a few years. There's a very good museum, the Ohio Craft Museum in town, which has been around for 30-some years, which has a yearly venue, which I've been in, I guess, I think 8 years now consecutively. And there are galleries around the country that you can apply to show your work in. And so,
And that's what you've been doing?
Yeah.
So the different, we really wanted to try and show a variety of the materials that you were working with. But the newest, or the pewter, is that right? Or sort of, yeah.
Kind of. It's not only is it about a quarter of the price of silver at this point right now. It's also much more forgiving. It's a lot easier to move. And you still get a nice shiny effect, which is part of the eye candy of the pieces, is that you can polish it up, and unless you know better, it looks like silver. So
Yeah.
But,
Really great. Danielle, can you tell us a little bit more about Suite 42? We sort of mentioned it a little bit, but about when you're going to go to Dresden. But when did you guys start working together, and how did that happen?
Let's see, it started with, we've been working together for about a year and a half, maybe about a year and a half. And it started because our good friend Cheeto Johnson, who's a Detroit artist, was putting together a book project. He was asking all of these artists to put a romance novel together. And he was curating this library of romance novels. And he had asked me to include a romance novel. And I just kind of playfully asked Tara, all of us went to graduate school together, and let's make a book together. She's a photographer, and I'm a sculptor, and we had always had this kind of ongoing dialogue since graduate school, and we both had very similar, different skills, but very similar interest in making, and our ideas were similar, and so we really had a good time. It became a very playful thing, and our romance novel ended up being an art form. We chose an art form, and we made it into a quarter of its size, and we invented these characters to kind of talk about these ideas of relationship and loss of identity, and kind of this was about like the sex and violence and struggle. And then it turned into us later. So we put this book together, which has been kind of traveling around with Cheeto's exhibition, which is called Let's Talk About Love, Baby. But then we started talking about about relationships more, and thinking about ourselves as artists. And so it changed from being this, the characters kind of morphed. They were wearing these very, uniform, this kind of loss of identity. They were dressed the same. And it basically was kind of this reflection of the self. It was kind of this mirror of oneself, actually, the relationship. But then it turned into us talking about what is a relationship and what is our love. And we realized that our love is art making, and everything that applied to the characters in terms of a relationship applied to us as artists and our love of art making. And like the struggle of being an artist, this kind of this work is kind of what it means to be working as an artist in the 21st century, like having to contextualize yourself constantly, and nothing is new. You're always layering and citing other artists and referencing what they have done in the past. So, and also everything is at your fingertips. And so this, the video is kind of a long story, but this idea that all of this knowledge is at your fingertips through the internet. And so you can pull up a David Lynch film, which that video is based off of an early 1973 David Lynch film called The Amputee. And so we reenacted it as the characters. The characters are, and in the original David Lynch film, this woman is, if you haven't seen it, this woman's doesn't have any legs, and she's writing this love letter to her boyfriend, and it just becomes this long saga, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like this soap opera, and it just goes on and on and on, and she's saying, you told me I was a flirt, and then I was looking at him, and you didn't show up, and it's like this very vague but very ridiculous letter. And so we kind of were thinking about that in terms of and here she has no legs, and so it was like we just put ourselves and pointing to ourselves in the studio. So that's myself sitting in the studio, and she's kind of bandaging my wounds, and we're also thinking of ourselves as a collaborative, like our relationship is always about this dialogue between where is our art, who's doing what. It becomes the soap opera of a conversation. So we're pointing to ourselves in the studio, and as ourselves as artists, working and struggling, trying to survive and trying to keep a balance. And so the dialogue in the film is literally tapes of us talking back and forth, like, you should be wearing this, no, I should be wearing this, no, you should be sitting, we should do it in the studio, because this, you know, we're like, but Bruce, now we like making sure that we're referencing, like, well, you know, the Bruce Nauman of what you do in the studio, like, should we be in the studio, or should, you know, so this constant dialogue of what it should be. So anyway, so it kind of is it's morphed from being about just personal relationships with another person, with oneself, to our love of being an artist.
And the photographs, the stills, I think some people were initially assuming it was from the video, but that you consider that as a connected body of work, but they're not stills from videos, right?
No, they're not still. The one piece is just a photograph. It's a 4x5 that was scanned in and turned into a pigment print of the piece. And so it's about working as an artist. So we document the work as artists. That becomes our kind of, the documentation of the work becomes our like whole existence, and then it also becomes a product. So we tried to document the work as much like a product as possible. I mean, it's the sculpture, and then it's also Tara as a photographer, myself as a sculptor. It's kind of this mirror of ourselves again. So we're just mirroring back and forth. The sculpture mirrors the print. Mm-hmm. But the one of us floating is us floating in Lake Champlain. But it's like this. The characters are constantly like fighting and struggling and loving, and so they're constantly like killing one another or dying. And I think that like the death of the character is constant. And actually, we were just talking today about the death of the character. But it's like this working as an artist. This kind of constantly trying to reinvent, and you have like this 5 minutes of fame, and then you have to kind of re-pull, and it's like this constant like building up and you know, it's just, I don't know, it seemed like it made sense today as this kind of, as an artist, you're constantly building up and like falling apart and building up, so it's like, but we're, you know, anyway.
Yeah. So then you just end up lying face down in Lake Champlain.
Yes, there we are. And actually, so the funny part of that is it was like, there was all these little, I mean, it's like funny, and it's like so playful. I think the working in a collaborative is like, it becomes this very, very playful thing where it is us, you know? It's like this fine line between like, it's really truly us, but then it's also like, we're trying to contextualize it. So it's a fun thing, but that day there was like all these little dead fish in the water, and Tara had her iPhone in her back pocket. It was like all these side stories going on in the
It's getting too much. Well, thank you guys. Those are pretty much all I wanted to ask you, but we wanted to open up to the audience to ask some questions. Matt, are you able to turn on, is he up there? Turn on the light a little bit so we can see people? Thank you. Okay, and so you don't have to come down. We have microphones that will come to you if anybody in the audience has a question. Oh, I know somebody has a burning question they want to ask. Yeah, that always happens. Oh, I'm sorry, you have to turn it on and flick it. Well, you can probably hear you. You can probably just yell.
Lynda, about the, I forget the full title. It was the one of the two women, and they're holding the babies, and they have the hoodies. And I was just trying to get more of a story and your inspiration behind that. Some of it looks modern, like the hoodies look modern, but then it seems like it might be an older type thing that's going on. So I was just wondering if I could hear the backstory on that one.
Well, I'm a lady of a certain age, and a lot of my young friends are having babies right now. And I have no children of my own, so I asked them, well, you know, what's it like to have a baby? And one person told me something that really struck me, and he said, well, I didn't feel like I was a separate person. I just felt like I didn't have anything to do with it. It was just, I had no control over it. I just, like, nature took over and I had this baby. Like, you can't, like, decide, I don't think I'm not going to have it, you know, like in the middle of labor. So, like, you're just part of this process. So I was thinking about that, and I thought, what a sweet idea, you know, that life is giving birth to itself constantly. I mean, moment by moment, but when you have a baby, life is giving birth to itself. So I thought, how could I communicate this to other people? I mean, it seemed like such a sweet idea and seemed like something that was worthy to meditate on, to be honest with you. I mean, that's something you could think about for a long time. So I put the painting together in order to communicate that idea. So I had 2 ladies of different races, right? And then their babies, though, are the same. They're the exact same. And then the figures, they're both looking at you. They're looking at the viewer. But when you look at the painting, the exact center of the painting, there's nothing there. And there's nothing that we can really say about the spirit of life or nature. We don't know enough to say what we'd like to say about it. It's just empty space. So, and I could go on and on about it. I mean, I'm a very sort of overly rational type of artist, I guess. But the hoodies, I liked the form. It sort of looked, it was sort of reminiscent of a Madonna, but it was modern. The pillows behind the figures, they're sort of reminiscent of a halo, but they're not really halos, you know. But it evokes that. And the idea behind that is, like, as far as I'm concerned, life is holy. And that's what I'm trying to communicate. Is that it? Is that good enough? Okay.
Anyone else?
I have a question for Michael. The Dresden pottery. Steven, I'm sorry. Got confused. Anyway, Steven, the Dresden pottery that you were working with, like I understand the combinations, the hybrids, and also the ones that are sort of drilled through with holes. But some of the pieces looked like they weren't really changed, or like specifically the duck, and I was wondering, you know, did you was that basically taken straight from a mold, or did you sort of play with that form a little bit, or what, and what was the thinking behind that?
Well, the duck is actually a hybrid of two different forms, so it's good that it reads as a duck, because it's based off of the swan is the base, and then putting the duck head on there is the ugly duckling kind of thing. So it's like a small inside joke. But
I didn't catch it either. I'm kind of glad someone else mentioned that. It was when I first saw them. Anyone else? Well, obviously we'll have a little bit of time. They'll be hanging around in case any of you are just shy and you want to ask them or yourself. Thank you, everybody, for coming together. Yeah, you're very welcome.